Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming along this afternoon to our panel talk. I know lots of you have been at the show this morning, and hopefully you're having a nice sit down, having a bit of a rest after a very busy morning at the show. We've assembled an amazing panel here this afternoon to talk about the theme of growing for well-being, which I think is really super important. It's something that we're all talking about and thinking about in society and in our own lives today. I would like to make some introductions. Firstly, I'm Zoe Levey. I'm the editor of Wildflower magazine, and we are an independent magazine that was set up in 2018. The theme of nature and kind of that connection to nature is something that runs through the pages of our magazine. It's something that's really, really important to us. And whether we're talking about interiors or gardens or fashion, well-being, or events even, that connection to nature is something that really grounds the pages and the theme of the magazine. So I was really honoured and delighted to be invited this afternoon to interview everybody here. So without further ado, I will introduce. We have wonderful Nelly from Alitex, who is the brand director. And Nelly oversees all of Alitex's amazing exhibits at Chelsea, and directs their brand vision and all of the creative input, and it's a bit of a legend in her own lifetime.
Blimey.
And we have Beth, who many of you will know from her role as being head gardener at the Raymond Blanc Gardening School. And August is going to share some very exciting news about her new book that's coming out in February. Then we have Tait, who is the CEO of one of the most amazing charities, Horatio's Garden, who have been responsible for creating some of the most beautiful gardens and bringing them to spinal rehabilitation centres all around the UK. You're probably one of the best known charities, and I think your 5 years at the helm
Yes.
has really you've made some great waves. And then we have Joe Dunbar, who is a medical herbalist. I have to remember to say that correctly. And Jo is a pioneer of medical herbalism, and will be sharing some of her own experience and giving us some top tips as to how you can bring medical herbalism into your own lives. So we're hoping to give you some great takeaways from the session this afternoon. Growing for Wellbeing, as I say, is something that we're all really keen to talk about a lot more, and we'll save some questions for the end. If there's anything burning that you want to ask as the discussion progresses, then obviously do put your hand up, but I think that we'll have a nice sort of session at the end where people can ask all the questions that they would like to. Without further ado. So my first question to the panel is, individually, what does growing for well-being mean to you personally?
Escape, peace, dirty hands, definitely hands in soil. Just downtime, proper downtime. Away from anything, away from tech, away from everything. And seeing things grow.
And August?
Well, I suppose for me, gardening's changed my whole life. Up until 7 years ago, I was an air hostess, so I had really no connection with nature. I had no idea on sustainability, not anything at all, until I sowed my first seed. And it just, to me, was the most life-changing experience to know that I could put a tiny seed in the ground and it would burst through the soil, and then you can feed your family from this tiny little thing. It was just mesmerising, and I never did very well at school. I wasn't very passionate about schoolwork or anything like that, and for me, in my well-being, since I've started gardening, the only thing I want to do is learn more about plants. I want to nourish my brain every day with new knowledge and find new varieties, and it's just opened up a part of my mind that I never knew existed, that I want to learn, and that's something very new for me.
That's lovely. Yeah. Okay.
Well, as you know, I'm not a gardener. So I have to be honest about this. But for me, what I love about growing, seeing how people respond who've been through the hardest of times to what is happening in our gardens and how plants are growing, even if they're not aware of it and they don't know that that's what they're being affected by. We call our gardens quiet therapists, because they sit there and they hold people and they give this sense that life does go on. And that's what we want our gardens to say, is that though many people who've been through spinal injury feel that they have to struggle to find purpose again, what for me that looks like, that growing for well-being, is finding purpose again in plants, even though you may not be aware of it.
Okay, that's amazing.
For me, well, if I just set the scene, my apothecary is in my herb garden. So obviously, growing for Wellbeing is supplying my apothecary. So about 35% of my medicines come from my garden. And I just think one of the most magical things in the world is you pick a herb, let's say a nettle, you drop it into some boiling water, you give it to someone who's unwell, they get better, you know. It's just magical. So, and I chose nettle, which is actually a weed, so that's not usually what we set about growing, but obviously my garden is full of, let's say feverfew or lemon balm, you know, the same thing, growing for Wellbeing. Yeah. And it's also wonderful for my patients. I tell them about herbs that they can grow, and that is very empowering. That's really important. It's about sovereignty, taking your help, giving yourself power to get well with the plants all around you, in nature, in the glass house, in the garden, in pots on your windowsill as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So Nelly, tell us, why did Alitex choose to use the theme of growing for Wellbeing for your garden? This is your 63rd garden at Chelsea.
Not mine personally. 20.
Alitex's.
On a bad day.
But why was the theme so important for you for this year?
I think there's been connections with everybody here over the last months, weeks, years, and it doesn't come together in a plan. It sort of came together in a very organic way. And growing food, I think, is increasingly something people really resonate with. It feels good. It feels like the right thing to be doing. And we are speaking with Horatio's garden about providing a greenhouse in the next Horatio's garden in Middlesbrough. And I was fortunate enough to meet Olivia Chappell, whose son was Horatio, and unbelievable. We'll talk about that later. But just the impact of what the charity does and the changes it makes for people who've had their lives just change on a flip of a coin. And it is just that, you know, falling over when you're walking the dog or chopping down a tree and you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. It's just that level of change and impacting that life. And Joe came, every year at Alitex, we do something called Feel Good Feb. It started in 2020. I think we're doing it just as COVID was kicking. There was all this rumour of this stuff going on. And we thought, let's talk about some interesting things. And we have a range of people at Alitex, from the slick sales guys to the guys on the shop floor who are factory guys to the installers, all absolute gems. And it's nice to introduce different things that they might not normally be interested in, and some of them still aren't, but they've had an introduction to it. Breath work, yoga, Pilates, medical herbalism. And actually Joe came and did a talk in February this year. And I know Jo, she's local to us. And it really resonated with loads of people. And it was just like, oh, actually, yes, these things all come together. So on the stand, we can talk a bit about that. But I can't even remember what the question was.
why Alitex chose
it's
growing for Wellbeing.
All kind of tied together.
Yeah, but it's so important, isn't it? And it is a very broad topic. I mean, I think this is, you know, it's affecting all of us. So,
and the science behind it is growing and growing and growing all the time.
Yeah. So, August, your involvement in the Alitex stand this year, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement?
Well, I've always been a real fan of like every Chelsea Flower Show. I come and see Nelly. It's like my home, because to me, to see vegetables on the main street, it's like, this is it. This is my flower show. And then I was really lucky that Nelly just approached me and said, "Oh, would you like to make it your home for Chelsea?" And I was like, yes, please. This is like my dreams come true. And at that time, I'd had this sort of idea because I'd visited Horatio's garden at Stoke Mandeville. And for me, when I grow, I love sharing. I love sharing anything that I have with everybody. And when Nelly had asked me, I thought, oh, Stoke Mandeville's just down the road. We'd had a talk, hadn't we? And I thought, wouldn't it be lovely if I could share this incredible opportunity that people in the world never get the opportunity to grow for Chelsea? I mean, it's the biggest achievement of, you know, the gardening world to me. And I think then to be able to share that with the patients of Horatio's gardens. So I then put the notion forward to Nelly, and Nelly was like, well, we're already working together. So it was kind of like, it was meant to be.
Yes.
And then I've been going to Stoke Mandeville sowing seeds and just watching the patients who might not necessarily talk to each other on a normal daily basis. Some patients who haven't really thought about gardening, and we had a lovely gentleman and he was like, oh, I'm not really into gardening, but I'm just going to come and have a go because I've got a free hour. And we
It was the last one there.
I just want to stay, I don't want to go. And then seeing also, you know, that plants aren't just for 1 second. You don't sow a seed and then that's it. You sow your seed and you have to love it, you have to nurture it and spend the time with it. And then the patients are coming out into the greenhouse. And one particular patient, Michael, and he's a plants person at heart, and he literally looked after every single plant. And then we planted into globes, and it's just been, to me, the biggest gift I've had as well. So, and then I was just saying, we're gonna have an after party and take all the pictures and do some food and everything.
And how many varieties did you grow? So I know that you're a keen promoter of heritage varieties, and so how many did you actually grow?
Well, anybody here that knows me, more is generally my motto. So I actually grew over 157 different varieties of vegetables within the gardens of Le Manoir, to kind of whittle down to 80, although I've slipped probably 100 into the book. So I've been put on a dress ban. I've been told I'm not allowed to wear any more dresses in the book, and I've been put on a vegetable ban and a recipe ban because I put too many chefs in as well.
Yes.
So I grew 157 varieties, and a lot of those I brought to Chelsea. And they've all got a story. They all have heritage. They're from the Heritage Seed Library, another charity, which I'm really passionate about sharing their story as well.
And will those plants then go back out to some of the Horatio's gardens?
So I've left quite a lot of plants there.
They're loving it.
So there was millions of tomatoes we've sown. I'll be taking some home, so I have 2 gardens, and then I've got lots of friends and family as well. And then I will be bringing some more back to Horatio's garden, which they'll be like, oh.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely love it. One of the things that was really important to me is understanding how and why patients use the gardens, because there's this presumption that everyone loves a garden, but a lot of our patients were young men. So one of the big things we've done is brought pizza ovens into all the gardens. So growing tomatoes, we cannot get enough tomatoes in because they go on the top of our pizzas. So it's absolutely perfect. And I think it was interesting what you were saying as well is about seeing patients do work in the greenhouse. For me, why it's so rewarding is one of the key things is when you have a spinal injury, all choice and control is taken away from you. So someone gets you up in the morning, there's bowel care, everything is done to you. And in the garden, it's the first time you're having a direct effect on something positive happening somewhere else. So you are growing the seeds, you are making something happen in a life where you are feeling that you are constantly receiving care. And that's part of the reason it's so therapeutic, actually. And they so love doing it with you.
And so, Katie, can you just tell us a little bit more about that kind of patient experience? Because you see it very, obviously firsthand.
Yes.
As to, the well-being that your patients get from being outside in the garden. And I think you explained to me previously that they use the garden in very different ways, don't they?
I mean, I think what we know about people with spinal injuries is virtually everyone has gone through a hugely traumatic event in their lives, and they come into the NHS to go through rehabilitation, and our gardens are beside the rehabilitation centres. And there's something called cognitive overload in hospital, which means that everything quite rightly in the NHS has to be hard-edged, has to be sterile, you have the blue curtains around the bed, you're in a bed, there's notice boards, there's noise, and all your cortisol levels just rise because you're constantly under stress. And what we say in the gardens, when you come into the gardens, you have something called attention restoration. And it literally means your cortisol levels just start coming down because your mind's not being bombarded with all these different messages of what you should be paying attention to. And what we know is that people use our gardens, they sort of hold lots of different emotions because at the beginning, the main thing that people want is privacy. You're in a bay with 4 or 5 other people, you're listening to everyone's conversations, you're having these difficult conversations with friends and family, you just want a space that no one's overhearing what you're saying, space to cry in, a space to have personal conversations, you might not be going back to work. We have a lot of young men in our gardens, and a big issue for them is around they have lack of sexual function. What is their future life going to look like? Now that's a difficult conversation to have when you've got someone 2 metres away from you in a bed. So having the garden as spaces that they can go into and have these discussions is really important. And then what we see is they get more confident in the garden. We say it's your garden, it's not ours, it's your ownership. What do you want to happen in the garden? I have no rules, sadly, apart from drinking, which they're not allowed to by the NHS. But apart from that rule, we let anything go in the garden. It's not up to us. We're not parents. We're not saying you're not allowed to do this and you have to do that. We say, come into the garden and make it yours. Do what you. We've had gender reveal parties in the garden. We've had birthday parties. We have a lot of football quizzes because we've got a lot of young men.
Wedding.
Oh yeah,
We had a wedding.
We had a wedding.
We've had 2 weddings. We've had engagement. It's been. They're really amazing spaces. And what is really important to me, and we talked about this a bit briefly, and I was a journalist for a long time, is language really matters. So one of the words I've banned in the garden is garden therapy. This is not, we do not ever say to a patient, come and have some garden therapy, because it immediately puts up a barrier for a lot of the young men going, oh God, it's just another person doing things to me again. We just say, come into the garden, do whatever you want. If you can help us, amazing. You can help us in the greenhouse, do a bit of sewing, but help us, not we're going to be doing to you again. And that's really important to me. And all the language we use in the garden is about taking away barriers for people who haven't always got an enjoyment out of a garden. You know, there's a lot of young men who really aren't bothered about going into a garden. And what we have to find is what is the invitation to get them in the garden? Because once they're in, they're going to love it. But that invitation has to be right. And as you said, someone saying, I'm not bothered about planting out seeds, if we can get them in a more subtle way, food, I have to say, being the number one top thing to get people out into the garden, then they really become interested in the gardens. It's sort of stealth. And that really works.
Well, don't you have 100% feedback, positive feedback from patients using the gardens, which I think is absolutely amazing.
Yes.
So 100% of them say that the gardens changes their experience.
It does. And we know, we're doing lots more impact research now because I've worked very closely with the NHS, is understanding if we can put an economic amount on, if every patient uses a garden, we know the money it saves the NHS by very clever health economists. My argument to the NHS is much stronger if it's about money saving. They all think the garden's a nice place to be, but they're never going to invest in gardens, I can tell you, because they're never going to have the money. If I can say it's saving you money, because this is what it's giving patients, it's giving them, they sleep better, they engage better with rehabilitation. More critically, friends and family are more likely to come and see them if there's a garden, and that means they're more likely when they go home to go back into work, to form communications again, to keep friends. All of that adds up to an amazing sum of money. And we can say to the NHS, we're not a nice to have, we're not a luxury, we are critical to healthcare.
And also the impact on the NHS staff themselves.
Yes,
because,
exactly.
So the impact
So we
that
did
it has
a
on
study
the
in
staff.
Middlesbrough. We haven't built a garden yet in Middlesbrough, so I'm doing lots of impact on what that is like not having a garden. And we did a study with NHS staff that they spend less than 20 minutes a week outside. So in a week, NHS staff just don't get outside because there's nowhere to go in the NHS. Whereas when we have a garden, that number goes up. Still doesn't sound a lot, but to 20 minutes a day, which again, doesn't sound a lot, but if you're an NHS member of staff, you really don't have much time. And that means that retention is far greater with NHS staff because they have got a place to go outside. And especially in spinal injuries, very few staff want to work in spinal injury, sadly, because it's a lot about bowel care and it's very physical. Giving them an outdoor space is so important for them to be able to unwind at the end of a really, really hard day. And more than anything, like with the patients, for them to feel that someone cares about them. Someone says, here's a lovely place you can go and sit in. And that's the same with the patients. So we are the only charity I know who says we build high maintenance gardens. Everyone else is like, we want low maintenance. We don't want anything we have to spend. We say, no, we really want them. They've got to be amazing all year round. They've got to feel really loved. Actually, one of the words I ban is we don't maintain our gardens, we love them, because maintenance is about someone coming round with, a high-vis jacket, chopping everything down once a year. We have head gardeners who love our gardens because the more love we put into them, the more love people feel for them and include staff.
And I thought it was really interesting that you were saying that year round you look for interest, you look for all of those kind of sensory inputs for the patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that's so important for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that includes getting their hands dirty in the soil.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant for gut health. And actually people with spinal injuries have the worst gut health for any patient because you're inactive and because there's bowel care. So getting your fingernails, I had to fight the NHS on this the whole time, letting them get dirty hands is actually really important.
Yeah.
But we have to win that argument with every single trust, every single time.
And your gardens, though, they're like a roll call, aren't they, of some of Chelsea's finest designers. I mean, the roll call is
lucky.
phenomenal. So it's Cleve West and Tom Stewart Smith, and it's
Joe Swift, Sarah Price.
Yeah, I mean, just amazing.
Yeah,
so
we have been so lucky. And each of them brings something different to the garden, actually, which is really lovely. And the design's all quite different, but they all have a central theme that this is they're obviously hugely accessible. We have a lot of, most of our work goes into making the resin absolutely flat. That's where most of the money goes. But all our, the sense in all the gardens is slightly different, but fascination is a big part of it, is that idea of being taken out of the state you're in by being fascinated by something happening around you. And that is why planting all year round is so essential. And that we have things that basically take you away from what you're going through because you're so sort of engulfed by the feeling of being in nature.
And how do you encourage the patients to actually start growing?
Well, really, again, by stealth. So I would say it's characters. It's about the staff in our gardens forming those relationships. So if you can imagine, people are very depressed. They're not in a great place. They're in the warmth and sanctuary of their hospital rooms. The telly's on, they've got everything around them. Trying to get them in the garden is hard. Everyone thinks, of course we'll come out into a garden, but it's not a given. So we put the best possible personalities in the garden. So we have amazing head gardeners, and we have a patient experience manager, which I've brought into each garden now, who forms that relationship, and they come out to see that person, and then that person happens to be growing something in the greenhouse. They happen to be watching, and they happen to do it with them. So what doesn't work is saying, on a Thursday at 2 o'clock, we're going to be planting out. It's saying, when you're ready and you want to come out, you can come and have a chat and see me doing it. And again, it's all about personal choice. And the last thing we do, which is really important to me, which again has almost killed my trustees, but we've stuck with it, is that each month we have a budget for each garden. I bring the patients together and say, here's your budget. How do you want to spend this? So it's not about us, the charity, spending it. It's saying to you, what is it you want us to bring into the gardens? Because you know a lot better than I do. If you want to have, and we did it with a group of men in our Glasgow centre who are 4 Glaswegian men who'd all had injuries at work, all in the building trade, and we said to them, right, so we've got £1,000 a month, what do you want to spend it on? And the 3 things they wanted a Sunday high tea, so they wanted cake stands. It's the big thing. We want a cake stand, we want Sunday high tea. And then they wanted musicians who took requests. Love that, basically. Not anyone who wasn't going to take a request, so I really like that. And the third thing they wanted to get the Traitors game, so that they could play Traitors, and they wanted Claudia, but I couldn't get Claudia. I've got the Traitors game.
You should ask her.
But it was all about, well, none of that was gardening, but that was fine. It was all about being in the garden and then choosing activities and seeing the garden around them as a beautiful space to hold that.
And feeling like they're back at home potentially,
exactly.
or just feeling
exactly.
that
having high tea. Exactly. That it was their choice, and here's their budget. They had a few things to say about how we spent our budget, actually.
Yes. But they didn't name any plants.
No, exactly. But and we're all about empowering patients. It's their choice, not ours, and that's really important for me.
Sounds amazing. And so, Jo, explain to us if you wanted to get somebody into growing, so herbs are obviously one of the very easiest ways to get growing. So can you tell us a little bit about your garden, your kitchen garden at home, and how you what you like to grow and how you use some of the herbs in your medicine?
My kitchen garden is a failure. My kitchen garden has been handed over to the insects. It's now an insect garden, which actually I thought was quite fair, because when you go back into ecology, where does it all start? With pollination. So that's been given over to the birds and the insects. But my physic garden is more successful. And what do I grow? What was the question? What do I grow?
Yeah, or herbs that people can grow. So it's a way of kind of getting into this.
Well, how people can get into it, okay. So I love the saying is, let food be your medicine before medicine becomes your food. You see, so we can play with that. So you start off by growing vegetables, but let's say we're talking about herbs. So the simplest is a herb garden. Herbs are very forgiving. They don't mind poor soil, and they grow quickly and easily, and they can be used in your food. But then you can start blending that into medicine. For instance, say we're doing growing fennel. Fennel is lovely in your food, but fennel seeds are really relaxing to the gut and help with symptoms like irritable bowel syndrome. And then maybe you want to grow some peppermint and chamomile, and then you might want to start putting a little blend together. Let's say you have IBS. So these are culinary herbs, but they're also having medical effects. If you're lucky enough to have a beautiful glass house, then you can grow the pelargoniums, the rose-scented, which you've got quite a lot of those on your stand. And they're so beautiful, they're so sensory, but they're also medical, and especially for well-being, they're balancing. They balance the mood, and they balance the hormones. Aromatherapists use rose-scented geranium to balance the hormones. Other herbs that you might use would be lemon balm, which you can use. You can make it into a lovely cordial or a lovely summer drink, but also it's calming to the emotions, but lifting to the spirits, and it's antiviral. I used a lot of lemon balm over COVID, so everyone was so upset and stressed. So it was calming and antiviral, and that was really good. Yeah. So you know, you can start off, I think, simply starting off with culinary herbs, and then blend as your interest is piqued, using it gently in a more medical way. And may I say something about that book?
Yeah, in your bag. You've all got
so
one of
in
Jo's
your
books,
bag,
actually.
Nelly's very kindly given you my book, and I wrote that book for my patients, because when I go on holiday, oh Jo, I've got a headache, or little so-and-so's got worms, or tummy bugs, or whatever, chest infection, and of course I'm wherever I am, and I can't help them. So I think, what's in your garden? Which weeds are growing? What's in your kitchen? And I say, look, I can't do anything till next week, but here's a recipe for you. So the book that you have is all my recipes that I've given my patients, and that is the blend between gardening and your own health. You know?
And do you think that we're all becoming much more educated about how we use herbs or plants for our own well-being these days?
I think there's an interest. There's an interest growing, and particularly I found that over COVID, where you know, there's this nature deficit disorder. I think most of us recognise this, and over COVID, people found such relief going out into nature, and then, you know, started growing their own herbs, and then maybe started experiment. You know, what could you not find in the supermarket? No garlic, no ginger, no turmeric. Couldn't get it because everyone was self-medicating. You know, so yeah, big boom and interest there. And then some people just took it on, took it further. You know.
So I love your phrase, nature deficit disorder.
Yeah.
And I think all of us have talked over the last couple of days about how we feel like we've forgotten how important gardens are for our own well-being, and how growing something from that life cycle and nurturing something through the life cycle is so important for us. So Nelly, do you want to just expand on that and your experience of kind of using your greenhouses to provide a space or a sanctuary for people?
I think it's interesting, most of you have been at Chelsea today, and Chelsea isn't the solution to nature deficit disorder in any way, shape or form, let's be honest. Chelsea is a moment in time. It's a temporary moment. Thankfully, it's less about waste. There's an awful lot of work goes into rehoming and all the responsibility from an environmental point of view after Chelsea. But when I go home after a long day here, and I try to go home to my own bed and wake up in my own home, even if it's briefly, and just walking barefoot in the grass, it slows everything down. I think, did you say it's just like that cortisol level that drops? And I think, you know, just green, the colour, being around woodland. I mean, there's so much knowledge and awareness. And I think a greenhouse it's like your own home. It's very individual. I'm looking straight at somebody at the end here who should be on this panel, Tom, who is the head gardener of Westdean Gardens. He runs, I don't know, 8, 10 greenhouses. How many? 13 greenhouses. So what Tom doesn't know about greenhouses, but each one of those is different, isn't it, Tom? Different environments, growing different things. And then when you take it into a more commercial level, a private home level rather than commercial growing, do you want to have it just as a place to go and sit? You know, that
it was
sort
very
of
interesting
mixture.
that you had two on your stand, and you had designed one that felt very
Yeah,
like a place to sit and a place just to kind of chill out and a place to relax.
As well. It's definitely growing.
Whereas August was like
it's like Alex stuff.
So August through your greenhouse and how you decided to decorate that, or is that your kind of perfect scenario for all of your seeds and your passion for growing things?
I mean, I did get there and I had a bit of a mini panic attack. I thought I haven't got enough plants, and then I brought more, and I was like, oh dear, I think I've got a little bit over the top. And that is my personality, and that is me. So it's very, and I suppose in my world I use greenhouses every day. You know, I teach at the Raymond Blanc gardening school and I host, and it's an educational space. I would then go home and it's just my sanctuary where I will have a cup of tea.
Sanctuary is a good word.
And it's, you know, I can just potter, prick out, you know, for me, I garden all the time because gardening is my whole world, and just to prick out and sit in the greenhouse and prick out is just lovely. And then I work with private clients who have got beautiful Alitex greenhouses that they've turned into a dining room. So there's a dining room at one end, and then you've got all the propagation going on in the other end, and it's just every greenhouse I think is a reflection on people's personality, and obviously my personality is sort of inspired by my travels. So as you walk into the greenhouse, it's around the world in 80 seeds, but I was an air hostess for 20 years, so it's all pulled in from the travels that I've been on all over the world, and I just think that seeds and teaching people about it, I think my biggest passionate thing is that seeds have got stories within them. A carrot isn't just a carrot, a bean isn't just a bean, and for me, from an educational perspective, I came into gardening from sowing one seed, and if I can tell a seed story to somebody and that resonates, and they think, oh, do you know what, I'm going to sow that little bit of history, then that's my job done, is to try and get as many people growing as possible. And obviously, without the greenhouse, we wouldn't have half of these vegetables because they need to be kept and nurtured until the end of May, and then we're all going to go crazy and plant everything, can't we?
Yeah, exactly. What's the craziest thing you've ever grown?
Oh, well, I did introduce a few people to it today. The electric daisies. I don't know, did anybody try them? I made you eat one. It's one of those things, it's basically, I wouldn't say, you know, I'm going to eat electric daisies on top of every single dinner because they basically make you dribble. So it's not, I would say, the most pleasant experience. Your mouth starts watering. But what I love about it is it showcases how potent plants can be. And you have this 10-minute sensation, don't you? Of like thinking, I think I might be sick. But it is incredible. So if anybody's at Chelsea tomorrow, I have got some more.
We've really sold it.
I want to be a dribbler.
But I think that's it's just fun. And you know, I took the plants to, we had a big garden party at Le Manoir, and my general manager said, you are not bringing those electric daisies. I said, don't you worry. I'm going to take them and everyone's going to love them. By the end of the evening, everybody had champagne and they were queuing up for my electric daisies. I've never felt this. And if that again makes somebody want to grow, because they're like, oh wow, this is really, I want to grow it for a dinner party or something. So that's a little bit quirky. I also quite like the cucamelons because they're really cute. They're like little mini watermelons, and they taste like, they're a bit of a confused little plant. They taste like a bit of lime, but they look like a watermelon. They're quite fun. But also just general beautiful heritage varieties. So I grow some fabulous, there's some beans in the glass house called angel beans, and they're from the Heritage Seed Library. And the story is that there was a monk throughout the war, and he got all of the treasures from the church and buried them in the ground and grew these beans on top of all the silver from the church. And then when he opened the pod, the beans had angels on them, and they actually do. I don't know if I believe the beginning bit, but they actually do. So these beans, as you look at them, they've got a little halo and little wings on the actual seed, and it's things like that. I think, and they're from the Heritage Seed Library. So and then I've saved them every year as well. So there's too many.
I was going to ask actually, so are there any particular varieties of plants and flowers that you would suggest growing particularly for well-being? Perhaps this is another joke question.
Particularly for well-being. There are many.
If you're going to create a well-being garden or garden for well-being, what would you grow?
Well, shall we say we focus on anxiety and stress? Those are the biggies. Yeah. Well, there are many. So there's the valerian, which is my most popular herb in my apothecary. So valerian helps you to feel calm, and it gives you that space between the big thing, and you, just gives you a bit of space. Passiflora, which probably you'd grow in a glass house better. That's easy to grow, and that's peaceful, pacifying. Lemon balm, I've mentioned before, you can grow in a pot on your windowsill. The rose-scented geranium as well, you can grow in a pot. The rose, our beautiful rose, apparently science has shown that just looking at a rose brings your cortisol level down.
That's amazing.
Just looking at a rose. And when you inhale the fragrance, we always close our eyes, don't we? The fragrance goes right up the nasal olfactory, into the limbic system in the brain. That's straight into our brain. That's where our emotions and memories form, and it calms us down. So just the scent of a rose is enough. Yeah.
And Jo, can you tell us a little bit about why your patients are coming to you? Why do they seek you out? Yeah, you mentioned stress and anxiety as being...
Well, that's the big one, yes. So, herbs, we evolved with herbs. People say, how long have humans been using herbs? I say, as long as dogs have been eating grass. We grew together, we evolved together. And the use of herbs have changed over time. In the ancient times, probably they used herbs more as a nutritive. So at this time of the year, as that, here in the northern hemisphere where everything appears to be dead, and then that life force comes up, and the hunger month of February, where there was all the resources have just about gone, and nothing new has come. When the nettles and the ground elder was brought over by the Romans, but all those the hedge mustard, etc. When all that came up, they would eat those fresh greens, and that would be a vitamin and mineral tonic. We can still do it today. So vitamin mineral tonic. Later on, as life progressed, herbs were used more for infectious diseases. Parasites, big thing. Big wounds, wars, agricultural wounds, a horse which might kick you. So wounds and infectious disease. But now, it's anxiety and stress and burnout, huge. I think just about everyone's burnt out. And if you look at statistics, working people, 1 in 5 will experience burnout at any one time. Carers, in your world, 1 in 3 experience severe burnout and anxiety. And chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a more extreme version, there are 17 to 24 million people suffering from fatigue. And you can wind that back to possibly having the beginning in stress, cortisol, disrupting the immune system, and absolute exhaustion. So my biggest thing is anxiety, calming, sleep, adrenals, strength and stamina, cognition. All of this comes down to we're frazzled.
and
so grab the valerian.
And do you guys also see that as well in your various? I mean, August, you teach people how to grow things. Is that one of the reasons that they reach out to you? Is so that they want to have a bit of a break from their lives? Why do they reach out to you to be taught how to grow?
It's been really interesting over the last 7 years. I mean, I suppose at the Manoir I teach probably about 2,000 guests a year, and I see a huge shift in the type of people that are coming to come and learn. I have children from the age of 13 that are really passionate about growing, to Albert on the allotment, to people that have just got their first greenhouse and don't really know where to begin. But I think we've come away from the generation of people that want to have a gardener. I think people actually really want to know. They don't want somebody to come in and grow their vegetables for them. They actually want to do it themselves, and I feel that it is so beautiful to see so many people who have never grown a thing in their life, and they come in and it's like, oh, what I put and I think this is I've so many people have said, well, how do you grow a pea? And I say, well, the pea is the seed and the seed goes in the ground. And I used to think that as well. I mean, I wouldn't have even known where a potato came from 7 years ago. So I really have that. I understand it. I understand we have to start somewhere. But I think that we're really lucky that we're in this time now where people actually really want to understand it and they want to do it. And I think because supermarket food, there is no flavour. We wonder why our children don't like vegetables. You eat a carrot from the supermarket, it doesn't taste like a carrot. You have a strawberry from the supermarket, it tastes like polystyrene. And we're force feeding our kids these vegetables that taste of absolutely nothing. I think we want to teach the next generation. You know, parents want to grow food because they want to grow it organically, because they want to taste the flavour and teach the next generation the importance of it. And I think we're really lucky, and I feel very blessed that I get to fly that flag.
Yeah.
Well, what I find what I find interesting about what you all said is that this is all things we used to know.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to know about herbalists. We used to know, we used to know how to grow things. Hospitals were all built with outdoor spaces. Patients were taken outside every day. It just wasn't dressed up in anything. It's just what everyone did. Everyone grew their own vegetables. And we feel like, and it's so brilliant, as you say, that it's re-emerging again, because we did have it. It's not like it wasn't there. It's not like a new thing, is it? It's just that in the last 40 years, the cars come in, people have less time, supermarkets come in, fast foods come in, and some of that
generation of the ready meal.
Exactly, exactly. And some of that's good for women, obviously. They can actually get out of the home, not arguing over ready meals. But I find it fascinating that people did know about herbs, didn't they?
They did.
But so it's coming back to what our grandparents knew, actually. So if our grandparents were in this room now listening to us talking about gardening is good for you, they go, oh, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, the language around it, but also the importance of growing your own for nutrition as well. So actually it's what you actually eat as well. And so, I mean, it's interesting, both of you have written books that have some amazing recipes, obviously using things that you've grown. Do you want to just share a little bit about that?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we're here today with Charles, and Charles was the first person that I ever followed in gardening, and has been a huge part of my journey. But it all starts with the soil, and I think that is the most important thing. The soil is, for me, the basis to every single thing, and it's the basis of the food, it's the basis of the flavour. And I think that we have this common misconception that we need to feed our plants with this fertiliser, that fertiliser, these different things. But actually you've got all these incredible microorganisms that all live below the surface, that are all working together as a team. Now, I'm very much pro no dig, and what we do is we go in, we over fertilise, kill all those beautiful, incredible life cycles going on under there when you dig them, and it's like becomes a war zone. So you're breaking, we don't want to live in a war zone. Everybody flees, so all these beautiful organisms flee and disappear, and then you're left with no life and no flavour. And that's where it brings us to where we are. We're over farmed, we're overworked, and I think us as a home gardener can really achieve that flavour and taste by protecting the soil, and that's where the basis is the most. I've got a whole nother day that we could talk about this. But it is the most important thing, and I think that we have to touch upon the soil health, because that is, for me, the basis of everything.
And also the fact of having your hands in the soil. It's pretty damn good for you, isn't it? That's proven.
But also making that connection as well between actually what you're growing and actually cooking. So do you think that the two skills should almost be taught together?
Oh, millions.
That's the fun bit as well, the cooking, isn't it?
Exactly. It's almost the incentive.
Yeah.
It is absolutely everything. I do a course at Le Manoir where it's called Garden to Plate, and in the morning I teach the guests how to sow the vegetable seeds. We then go out, and the vegetable seeds then go home with them to grow in their own garden. We then pick the vegetables, because it's amazing how many people have never picked a vegetable. And that to me is the biggest gift, to be able to take somebody around a vegetable garden and pick a beetroot, pick a lettuce, and probably a lot of us gardeners in here take that so for granted that we do that on a daily basis. But actually, that to me is a gift, to be able to let people pick the vegetables and then to learn how to cook with it.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Digging up potatoes.
And again,
most
it's so
exciting
normal,
thing.
isn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
So
and do you do very much with children? Do you teach? How do you feel the next generation is going to evolve and grow them?
So I was actually a gardening teacher for 2 years in a school in Hayes, and it was a lot of the area. The children lived in flats; they didn't have any outdoor space, so I created a kitchen garden for the students, and it was a huge passion project of mine, and it was incredible. First day I went in, hands up everybody who eats vegetables. Oh, nobody eats vegetables. I said, right, okay, what about crisps? Oh, everybody's hands up. I was like, that's a potato, or it's from corn. That is all vegetables. It's all plants. And at the beginning of teaching, none of the students would eat anything. By the end of the 2 years, they were picking edible flowers, giving them to the teachers, eating the broccoli. And I had one lad in my class who was amazing. This is junior schools, and he was handing me tools to everybody. He was the most helpful child in the class. And I said to the head teacher, oh my goodness, this little boy is so incredible. And she said, I can't believe we're talking about the same child. He punched a teacher last week, and we had to call the police because what we're missing is we're all so focused on being academic that we miss the fact that actually there's so many skills in life that we need to keep the food system going. They're the basic skills in life that we should be educating. So yeah, I think it's a big thing. I do festivals and I teach at festivals, and then I do children's workshops as well. So trying to get that next generation connected.
I thought it was really encouraging that the RHS actually had lots of children there today, which is amazing. I mean, I saw some kids looking at worms, and they were just like totally fascinated. So I think that's really important. So I wanted to ask you all about how do you convince. There are obviously some sceptics out there. Obviously, we are converts. We've been at Chelsea today. We're all passionate gardeners. But how would you convert those people who don't believe that investments in gardens is worthwhile? I mean, perhaps this is one for Katie particularly, but how would you convince those naysayers who say actually the money could be spent elsewhere?
What I find interesting is before I was at Horatia's Garden, I was at a cancer charity called Maggie's for a long time, which I don't know if some of you know, which designs beautiful buildings. And when I started there, no one believed that design really mattered for healthcare, because it was seen that you have your medical care for cancer, the emotional side doesn't really matter. And I think that argument's sort of been won, that actually psychological support really matters. I can see the same thing happening with gardens, is that when, it used to be that gardens was sort of a very middle class activity, that it's for people, who could afford to have gardens, afford to have the space. And I think that argument's changed, actually. I think we're seeing loads more community gardens coming in. The National Garden Scheme is trying to open up its gardens a lot more, so you can visit community gardens as well. I've talked about the impact work we're doing. You have to have good impact, sadly. I mean, we all know it, but it's not enough to know it. We have to prove it, how important gardens are. And I absolutely think how we educate children about gardens is really important. We know that things like ADHD are on the rise. Trying to pen children in, we've got rid of a lot of school playing fields, but how to give children now back space outside is going to become really important.
No, thank you. I've been told that we only have 5 minutes to go. So I'm going to ask just one more question and then open up to the floor to answer some questions, if that's okay. So my last question is, if you had to save anything from your gardens, what would it be and why?
Oh, crikey. The dog. If I had to save anything from my gardens, go start the end.
So we're on a desert island and we can take one plant. Is that what you said?
Or anything from your garden. It could be anything.
Well, the birds.
That's so lovely.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm going to say this. I know it's not about plants, but the birds bring life to a garden. I love to feed my birds. I say my birds. I'm their servant because they watch me, they spy on me, they see me come down to the kettle in the morning, they're waiting on the fence. And then when I go down the path to my apothecary, they're hopping along and waiting for their seeds. And then they come into my apothecary and mosey around if they've run out. In fact, the robins worked out where the seeds are kept, and he stands and looks at them. And oh gosh, without birds, and even in the summer, they say you should only feed them in the winter, but why? In the summer, the ground is so hard, they can't dig for worms, and everything's been harvested, so I would save my birds.
That's so lovely.
I would very briefly, in each of our gardens we have a beautifully cut stone with words about Horatio Chapel, who started Horatio's garden, and I would save that from each garden, because if he hadn't had this amazing idea at 17 that people with spinal injuries needed gardens, we wouldn't have Horatio's garden. And very sadly, he was killed very shortly after he'd had this idea and been working in the garden with his dad, David. But for a 17-year-old to be so forward-thinking that he wanted to set up this first garden in Salisbury, I think that actually is what we'd say from each garden, because that was the germ of the idea.
Yeah. And I'm sure it will go on to inspire other charities or other institutions
working on lots
to
of other
do
charities.
what you're doing
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
Exactly.
He was an amazing person.
Oh, well, I think for me, obviously, it was time to be a vegetable, wasn't it? So I grew, asparagus was my first ever challenge. It took me 3 years to get my first full heart, well, it wasn't really very full, but it took me 3 years to get to it. And a chicken, I don't know if everybody does this, you know, like you video your vegetables, you're like, oh, I'm so proud of this one asparagus bit, and my chicken walked along just totally it. And then I started getting fabulous hops, and I actually did take it from my last garden to this garden. It's got a bit weak again, but I think for me it teaches patience, because so many things are annuals, but this is something that you have to wait, and it teaches me patience. I have got it in me.
That's amazing. That's brilliant.
I don't know, the dog is a croissant, so saying a greenhouse would also be an equally croissant. But I think it'd be flowers. I think it'd just be flowers, just because they just bring joy, and it has to be a pollinator, so just flowers.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we've just got a little bit of time for some questions. Does anybody have a question for our panel? Anyone in particular?
One for Katie. Well, because I went to see
you came with us, it was lovely.
Quite extraordinary. But I was wondering, you did sort of answer that the NHS have no plans to build any gardens. But one of the most striking things about visiting the garden is that it's sort of garden in an awful concrete jungle.
Yeah.
Have they, because of the success of the gardens, has there been any sort of approach yet from the NHS to sort of plant some trees, or not even a garden necessarily, because it's quite a difference between the garden to it was
I think the really sad thing is I think it's got worse, actually, because the NHS is in such a financial state. And I talked to the CEO of the trust, and she said, I would love to invest in a garden. Yet we are all terrified of being on the front page of the Daily Mail saying CEO trust head build a rose garden when people are waiting in the corridors. That is their fear, that they'll be seen, because it's an easy tabloid story, basically. And the NHS now in a much worse position than when I started working alongside them 15 years ago. I cannot see this happening. It's the third sector who are going to have to do it. But this third sector, but the NHS just needs to buy into supporting that and giving us the land to peppercorn rent. But I would be amazed, which is sad, that in my lifetime I'm never going to see the NHS building gardens. And what's more important, very last point, which I found fascinating, is it's not just the building them. If they don't put money into actually, and it's got to be a paid person looking after the garden, it's worse for your mental health looking out at a garden that's dying than looking out at a car park. So actually, if they're going to put in a garden that dies, it's worse for patients, because it gives you a feeling of lack of control. You see something dying outside your window and there's nothing you can do about it. It's actually better to look at a car park. Which is a hard argument. So not a great answer, not a very positive answer, but it is hard.
And even some trees.
I know. I'll let someone else pay for them.
Do we have any other questions?
Rose geranium was so sad and really calming. How would you just?
How do you do it? Well, with rose geranium you can make a tea. So remember that when you have a fragrant plant, there are little oil ducts, and those hop when they hit the boiling water. And the volatile oils that come up are essential oils. That's what goes into the little bottles. So what you do is you put your leaf in the teapot, lid on, or a mug, saucer on top, and then leave it for 5 minutes, and you can drink it as an infusion. However, people made wonderful puddings with rose geranium. Ooh. And even more interesting, I once knew a lady who had a beautiful little bowl of large rose geranium leaves as her loo paper.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a
Love that.
pretty botties. but a very nice one would be a sort of maybe like a blancmange, fragranced with that rose geranium, would be delicious. Or say like a tofu jelly. If you made silken tofu and gelatine and rose geranium and sweetened it with whatever you want to, that would be very lovely.
Jo, do you want to talk about the tea that you've made in the bag?
Oh, I made you all a little tea. I called it garden petals, and it's just I think it's got, if I remember, Roman chamomile, rose petals, lavender, passiflora, and one other.
Lemon balm.
Lemon balm from my garden, yes. And so that's it there, that's right. So you just take take a teaspoon in your, just like I've described, and you drink it as a peaceful tea. It's not a very heavy, relaxing tea, but it's nice and peaceful. Again, just giving you that mental, emotional decompress, you know. Yeah, my pleasure. In my book, which you get, I do tell you how to make tinctures, vinegars, oils. So it will all be there for you. Okay.
Just a question about the birds that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, I read that bird song helps plants to grow.
Oh,
about that.
I didn't know that.
No,
What
that's
a
so
joy.
nice.
I love
Makes sense.
it. Does make
Yeah, it
sense.
does.
It does.
I love
On a
that.
beautiful
Yes, so do
level.
I.
So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Or maybe the birds are singing because the grass is growing.
I mean, it's something about the sound is
Yeah, yeah.
important to plants.
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
If the birds aren't there, they
Yeah.
can't grow so well.
But
Yeah,
it's like
same as
you
us,
mentioned.
though.
I'm sorry, I couldn't. I had to run. But you mentioned about energy. You're quite interested in energy, and I think there's an energy in flowers and in bird song, and of course the electromagnetic field of the earth and of trees and of us. Exactly. Yeah. All resonates beautifully. Yeah.
A full sensory
song of
experience,
life.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great
It's a
question.
nice way to end.
Maybe one more question?
August, of all the things you've grown, what do you think tastes the best?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Because I love everything. I love growing things like, well, obviously garlic is a no-brainer because I use that all year round. Then I do love a squash because there's so many. I think that, especially in the UK, we look at pumpkins and squashes as that one moment of carving. And that's it. You know, we all think, well, then we throw it in the bin. And the amount of impact that has, we've got a food crisis and we're throwing pumpkins in the bin. But actually, there's some incredible varieties, which I can never say, and Raymond would probably literally hit me over the head with a hammer. But there's one called Gallo Diacenes, probably pronounced really beautifully with a French accent. But what you do, you can still grow for Halloween, for that one moment, but you get a knife in September and you score a word into it and all the sugars start bubbling up and escaping and you can actually grow your name in walls.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, honestly, it's the most incredible
I love
feeling
that.
in the world. And then you can use that as your centre display for Halloween, but also the culinary, it is so tasty. So Raymond does an amazing soup and it's just with milk and butter, so healthy and wonderful. But it is so delicious. But also it gets kids engaged because I used to do ones with bumblebees on it or write the children's names on it and they all just bubble up. So that I think is a necessity to the garden.
Remind us of the name of it again.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Diacenes, but I'll write it down because it's probably not
Yeah.
at all. But they do have it. Premier Seeds have got one. They've got an organic range as well.
Excellent. That sounds so fun. Any more questions? No, I think we're ready to wrap up. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I hope we've given you lots of food for thought and lots of ideas and lots of takeaways. And do get in touch if you think of other questions that you'd like to send our way. But thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
to our panel. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.